This is Alexa Linton, and you're listening to the Whole Horse Podcast. I'm coming to you from the Cowichan Valley on beautiful Vancouver Island in Canada, and I'm excited to be bringing amazing instructors from around the world to share their knowledge about all the ways that we can keep ourselves and our horses well and happy, and about some of the cutting edge techniques, training, and different aspects that are coming into the horse industry and changing it from within. I'm so excited you're here, and I'm excited about the times that we live in and the shifts that are happening in the horse industry before our eyes. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. It's Alexa Linton here with the Whole Horse Podcast, and I'm very tremendously excited for my next guest today. She's here from her amazing 80-acre retreat facility in Kamloops, BC, and she runs some incredible retreats and private intensives for women and their horses and all sorts of things all over the world. We've got Hillary Schneider here with us today, and Hillary, so glad you could join us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been great. We connected and it was like, okay, we got to do this. So Hillary was someone I met, I'm trying to remember how long ago. It's a couple of years ago now, and I was really blown away by just the quality of her work and her integrity and what she was up to with horses. So very excited today to sit down with Hillary, and we're going to, share a little bit. She's going to share with us some of her ways of bridging the gap between, it's a little bit of a gap that a lot of us have a hard time with in the horse world, is between that sort of traditional horse industry and then something quite different. And, I think a lot of us feel that pull. So Hillary, tell us a little bit about your background. How might you be able to help us with this, bridging this gap?
Yeah. So thanks for the opportunity. I know Alexa and I were just chatting about, what could we talk about? And I thought maybe my kind of transition from, being in the horse industry to doing what I do now, and, what that journey was about. So a little bit of my background. I've been around horses, been in the industry for probably, I would say, like 15 years. I grew up going to summer camps with horses. As soon as I was able to get to a stable and clean stalls, I was doing that. And then I decided at age 13, I wanted to be a horse breeder. After visiting, my mom was doing an article on a woman who bred Egyptian Arabians. And I just fell in love with this idea of breeding. I'm not sure I don't know if it was about, the foals and, just not knowing what other field I would do with horse. I wasn't really a show rider or anything like that. But, at 13, being at this place, I was like, this is what I want to do. So I kind of set my sights on being a horse breeder. I had this, dream and fantasy of moving to Kentucky. I had an obsession with thoroughbreds, and I ended up getting into Olds College in Alberta. It was the only, school in Canada that offered equine production and breeding. So that's what I did. And then I found myself in the thoroughbred industry, working on farms, and I did my internship in New York. And then I worked in Ontario and Alberta. So there was a couple of different places that I worked, in the thoroughbred industry for a couple years until I kind of transitioned out of it. So I have a kind of an extensive background of being able to be exposed to different, parts of the industry. But my background really is with the breeding and with thoroughbreds in particular. So that's so that's my history. I guess I can, I think the thing that I don't need to go into, so much of the things that I saw in the breeding shed. I don't think that's kind of what we want to get into. But I would say that, what kind of drew me into being with horses and having the experience with them was, I remember as a young kid, and probably people who have horses or maybe around horses, I think that there's this draw to be with horses that I think sometimes comes from a place that is unexplainable. So as a kid, I just, I had this incredible passion and obsession with horses that I think felt a lot deeper than just, being in the saddle. There was many times, even at summer camps, where I would just sit in the stall or sit in the field and just hang out with the horses, because there was just a calm or peace that kind of came over me with them. And, I think as a kid, I remember, I wasn't a super social kid. I think I was a deep thinker for my age, and I wasn't able to relate to kids my own age. And I always felt with horses, there was that acceptance. I know a lot of us probably, when we're around horses, there's that feeling of, unconditional acceptance and belonging. So I think from a very young age, I was conscious that there was something special about being with horses in terms of just how it brought me home to myself, or made me feel accepted in a world where sometimes it was overwhelming to me. They felt very safe. I think I didn't really, at that point, not really conscious about how I was connecting with them. It wasn't until kind of later on, and I guess I'll get to that point, when I read The Tao of Equus by Linda Kohanov. There was like a light bulb moment went off in my head of like, oh my God, this is what I've been doing my entire life. And, even in the breeding farm, like in the breeding shed, I can remember I used to go out and, people used to laugh at me because I would go out into the fields with the mares and foals and I'd just hang out. Yep. And stuff would happen. I'd sort of have these interactions with horses that kind of felt very intentional and deliberate. And I would sort of sit there and be like, I don't know what's going on right now, but something's happening. There's something going on in this exchange. And I don't know if I was always conscious of that, but I remember I would be sitting there being like, this is kind of wild. What's going on, or what I'm feeling, with this. And that was happening, at the breeding barns, just being with the horses that were at the stables that I was working with. So I think, again, going to college to be a horse breeder, I didn't really connect with, being a rider, being a show person, and the whole concept of, being around babies and bringing life into the world. And, that really spoke to me. I think that once I actually got into the industry, I discovered pretty quickly that it wasn't really nurturing of the relationship that I really wanted to have with horses. I think that, horses, you're not in that type of relationship. There's not really a soul relationship there. It's like, I'm breeding this mare so I can sell the baby and make money. And so I felt the big disconnect, and I didn't really resonate with how the horses were treated or how they were held. And I don't think it was what I was looking for. I remember being incredibly devastated at the time, because I didn't know, well, now what does my path with horses look like if I'm not in the breeding? Yeah. And because I didn't have a horse, I didn't get a horse till I was 27. So I didn't have my own horse. I didn't grow up on a farm. I sort of had to find ways to be with horses, and the breeding industry was it. I didn't grow up taking riding lessons. So being, doing the riding thing wasn't really available to me. Even from a place, my parents didn't send us to riding lessons during the year. But I remember leaving the breeding shed, which was painful for me, but I had this thought, like, I really wanted to do something that was honoring of horses and honoring of people. And I had no idea what that looked like, but I think that there was something in me that felt like there's something, and I want to be able to capture or connect to in this relationship that is not found, in the breeding shed. So that, I think, was, I think the place that I felt that I really wanted to, I was seeking for. So what actually ended up happening for me is I found myself going back to work for my grandfather, or not going back to work, but I ended up moving to Hamilton. I was in Alberta at this point, and I ended up moving to Hamilton. My grandpa owned a steel company, just so I could figure it out. I just didn't know what I was going to do. And I remember when I left the breeding shed, one of the places I worked with, and people might've heard of this place, is Winfield's Farm in Oshawa. So they bred Northern Dancer. So if anybody knows thoroughbreds, Northern Dancer won the Kentucky Derby in 1964, and most thoroughbreds have his breeding line. So it was a very prestigious place. But I used to go back there, and I used to just go hang out with the horses because I missed them. So I still kind of continued that. And same thing, stuff would happen when I was in the field. And so I went to work for my grandfather, and then I decided that I wanted to do training to be a life coach because I'd had a coach in my life. So I was seeking fulfillment too, right? Like I want to do something fulfilling. In the back of my head, there was always this horse piece. So I went through the training, and this was in 2006, and all I could talk about was horses. That was like the only thing I could talk about was horses, and how am I going to get back to horses, and what is that going to look like? And it was in one of my programs that somebody approached me and said, there's these women in Minnesota who, they don't have their program anymore, but they did back then, that do this program where they coach with horses. And I thought to myself, I'm like, oh my God, so people are doing coaching using horses. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I started to then, I then did an apprentice with them for 10 months. And that kind of led me into finding Linda Kono's book, The Tao of Equus. And then I ended up spending about 3 or 4 years doing different trainings with different people that were doing this work, and just being exposed to the industry. So, I did a private retreat with someone who had studied with Linda. I did Chris Irwin's EAPD program and EGALA, and then I ended up doing a 6-month program with Horse Spirit Connections in Ontario. And it really was like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. It sort of had that way of, I think, really having the horse be a conscious partner in that conversation, I think, of growth, but also that deeper connection. And it was, I think it kind of gave me a consciousness of like, oh, so this is, and I remember reading Linda Kono's book, and she talks about this thing called Wu Wei, of just being with horses. Yeah. And just being with them. And I was like, oh shit, I've been doing that my entire life. And I had no idea that was going on. So I think there was sort of like a light bulb moment and an aha. And so, since 2007, I've sort of been on this journey of really wanting to, I think, create opportunity for people to come and see and interact with horses in this way, because I think it's deeply powerful. And also it's, I think my advocacy coming from the horse industry and seeing where we don't always witness horses that way. We don't see them as a teacher. We don't really, I think, always appreciate what they're bringing to our lives. And I work with a lot of horse people. I have a lot of horse people that have, they come here and they're like, I've never worked or looked at a horse this way. And I think that there is, from just that perspective of that tie-in, a way that we can really appreciate and honor the role that horses play in our lives. I think not just as a, performance place if we're riding or breeding, but, why are these horses coming to us, and what do they have to teach us? And my hope is to sort of create a place where we shift a little bit of our awareness of how we relate and connect to horses in partnership, and not just, I think, just regular people. I really think just within the horse industry, I think there's a lot of people that are maybe, again, like you said, are starting to be conscious of there's something there, and I don't quite know what's happening. But I think, and I'm not somebody, just, I think, to clarify, I don't think there's anything wrong with riding horses, or, I know that there's lots of horses that actually like to be in partnership with people in that way. I think that there is a thread, though, where we can be really conscious about how we're partnering with them. And I think, who is this horse that we're partnering with? Is I think important. One of the things that is a little bit, I guess, unique about what I do in particular, and what has come to me, I think, from my herd, is I have 20 horses, 20 horses now in my retreat space.
Soon to be
crazy.
21.
Soon to be 21, because I have a pregnant mare, which is wild. I think this was always a dream of mine, but it's kind of crazy. And I definitely led up to it. You met me when I was leasing my place in Ladner. So I did have one horse to 5 to 8 to 13 to, so it's been progressive. But, most of my horses are coming off the back end of a career, and they're not rideable anymore. So kind of 95 or 96% of my horses are not rideable or seem to be of use in that normal, relationship or typical relationship. A lot of my horses come through private people hearing about what I do and they're looking for a retirement home for a herd. I will kind of, as an asterisk, say my herd is full. So if people are listening to this,
say, I think that's probably a really good addendum there.
Yeah. My herd is currently full. I do have a waiting list. So one of the things I do, because I get people all the time that ask me, I do have a wait list. But I think another passion I do training of this work. I think that where more of us are more conscious is it actually allows horses, I think, to live with us, throughout their life. So they don't need places like me.
Yeah.
So, there's a little,
that piece is so big, I think, for, that sense of, how it's so normalized, how many homes a horse might have, meeting a horse that's had 14 homes, you're like, yeah, that's a lot. But, it's like, these sorts of things have, that would never, like in a dog, you'd be like, oh, yeah. So to really
it is.
strengthen the commitment for people, right?
And it is, and I appreciate that it's a sensitive topic. I think I'm very, very conscious of, never wanting people to feel bad about what, but I think it's also important for us to look at the commitment, of what we stepped into, and also appreciate, I think at times, like, I know this might seem like a little bit of a harsh word, but you're discarding an amazing partner and a teacher. When we look at, I can't ride it anymore, so it's no use of me. And so I think that there is a way that we can be more appreciative and honoring of that relationship while being sensitive to certain circumstances. But, I have a few of my horses in my herd that have same thing. They've been through probably multiple owners, and gotten to a place where they can't perform, the way that they had, or they're not rideable, and people just did not know what to do with them. And so, a lot of the times it's usually the ones I take they're kind of like, they're either coming to me or they're being euthanized or potentially sent back to auction to go to slaughter. So, they're sort of on that last, but it's incredible the experience that people have with these horses, and then, that they get to have this really deep purpose. And, I'll say that where my horses have really aided me in my own life in terms of creating this business or whatever, I wouldn't be able to do it without that partnership and what they've taught me about myself, and where they continue to encourage me. And I think the thing I kind of was trying to get at that I wrote. So I like to speak to my horses have medicine, and each particular horse has a certain medicine. And I think it's true about us, but I like to really pay attention to the horses in my herd and who are they, and what is the teaching that they might bring. So when I have clients come out, there's a big emphasis that I have on which horse is really connecting with a person and why, and what is significant about who that horse is, and what their role is in the herd, what their story has been and what their background has been. So there's a lot of where I think there's a true partnership is the personality, that horse and who they are is really highlighted, and we pay attention to that. It's not just a horse in the field. It's like, who is this horse, and why are they showing up for me right now with what's happening in my life, and how is it maybe enlightening me to something that's going on? Or if I'm having a certain interaction with my horse, right? Like, I'll notice that my first horse, Indra, who was not who I thought would be my first horse. He was this, 2-year-old, half wild, wouldn't walk into barns, green and aloof. I wanted to rock the horse, and that was not who he was. But he taught me so much. I think of when I first had him, what he taught me and what I was going through in my life was huge, and being able to appreciate that. So I think there's something that can be very rich about that conversation and partnership with our horses that sometimes get missed because we're in a task or we're in a performance and we're not really paying attention to that, or what they're bringing up for us to look at, or where they're mirroring for us, what is going on in our lives that this horse is kind of picking up on, or is trying to champion us, whether it's being stronger in our boundaries or our leadership, or softening. Like, there's so many places there that they're really being reflective for us if we pay attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We get caught in, sometimes I know for, and maybe you can speak to this, like, is it I would say that it's often harder for us who have been involved in the horse industry and have done horses and ridden horses and done all these things to actually get into that space of seeing those things than it is for maybe someone with brand new fresh eyes that had never spent time with horses, right?
Yeah. I have a philosophy around that, too. And I think that, speaking to my own journey, I think one of the things that happened once I started doing this work and being more conscious, I had a lot of shame around what I was taught with horses. Like it brings information too. Like I had no idea, and how much and you're not taught that as a kid too. Like, it makes me emotional. I had a lot of pain around that.
Yeah.
I think what becomes a little bit challenging when we've been around horses and then all of a sudden there's like a new awareness of it. I think it brings up of like, we think about, oh my God, every time that I projected or did this thing to my horse and I had no idea. And we have a lot of, guilt or shame, and it can be, I think, very painful.
Yeah.
So I know that that's been a big piece for me, why it was maybe I went there, but what I had to move through was sort of feeling like, oh my God, I didn't know that, growing up, or I wasn't exposed to that, when you go to summer camps and even in the breeding shed, like, that's not how you get taught of how to be with horses or how to handle horses, or so there was things that I probably engaged in that I didn't know any better, and then I felt terrible. The thing that I've learned from horses is that they're very forgiving, and they don't, I think there are, one of the biggest journeys I think that they take with us in a lot of ways is us being able to be forgiving of our human nature. And sometimes we do things and we cause pain, and, God bless those horses. I have horses in my field that have no business trusting people. And they're so willing to engage. They love, they absolutely love, I think, the interaction that they get with people. They're so present to that. So I think that there's a lot of compassion and forgiveness. I think that's a piece of it. I think one of the things that, if we're in the industry and then all of a sudden there's a consciousness, it brings up a lot of stuff of, I didn't know, or maybe there was something that felt not right at some point and I went along with it anyway. So we have to look at that. And I think sometimes it's difficult for us to look at that. But I do know it's not, there's a space of probably forgiveness and compassion, and we didn't know any better, and the horses don't hold that against us. So I think there's that piece for sure. I think that's a big piece of it, because we don't want to feel like we've contributed or been a part of, pain. We don't, that's a hard thing for us to
Yeah, and I so appreciate you speaking to that, because I think I know I've gone through that process, and I still go through that process because I was, so indoctrinated to a certain way that sometimes those old habits die hard, right?
Yes.
There's still moments where I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I, did that again, or right. So yeah, it does bring up, it's very charged, and so to own that and be accountable to that can often mean, oh my God, all these things that happened where I may have inadvertently done harm, or it can be a big thing to work through, for sure.
Totally. Yeah. And I think, I often say this too. I even think of, people who maybe are drawn to this space, but they don't come, or it takes them a little bit. I think because there's a fear that I'll be exposed to myself in a way that I'm trying to avoid. And we know with horses, for the most part, even if you're riding, like, horses pick up on everything. So if we're in a bad mood or whatever, you're probably, maybe not going to have the greatest ride. My first horse, Indra, and he taught me actually a lot of being responsible for myself, because if I was in a mood, that horse would come nowhere near me. It's like, you work that shit out, and then maybe I'll come and be with you. It's like I could remember being in the field, like, seething, like I'd be so, and it was all internal, but like, he would not come anywhere near me, and I couldn't catch him for the life of me. And so I had to, like, he really taught me, it's like, no, you sit there and you be responsible for your energy and what's going on for you, and then I'm happy to be with you. So he was a horse that he actually taught me a lot about, you know, boundaries in a lot of ways. And then I had to look at that. I was like, you know, oh, right. So I've got to sort this through, and then he'll come over, and then he'll want to be with me. But I think we also have this fear that, you know, subconsciously, I think we think we're bad. You know, I think this goes with the shame. We think we're bad. I think we feel like, you know, if I'm going to look at horses this way, they're going to really expose where I'm, you know, bad. But I think in a lot of ways, I think the journey with horses is, I think they bring us back to our authenticity, which is loving and forgiving. And, you know, yes, we're flawed as human beings, but that's not what they're trying to evoke from us.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Oh, then. Hillary's dog is trying to break in.
This is why I have to use my dog because he's like.
Yeah. And I think that's so brilliant a point, Hillary. I think that, you know, this sense of, you know, we're so fearful. I think that fear still comes up in me sometimes where I'm like, oh God, what's gonna come up, you know? But I realized that through Divas, you know, what she really was like, you know, asking from me was, okay, like, how are we going to show up today? You know, like how are you going to, you know, she was actually calling me forward, but in a, like, you're right, a really compassionate, you know, I see all of you, I see the flaws, I see all of it, but, you know, also, how are you going to show up? Right. And every horse has, like you said, that different medicine, where it's like, okay, I get to see that part of myself today, you know, and it's, I mean, I can't even imagine having a herd of 20.
Crazy. Yeah.
So many
and, you know, I
pieces.
think totally there's a lot. And, you know, I think the other thing too that I found, like, especially in my exposure to the horse industry, there's a lot of opinions, and there's a lot where this is the right way. And I think that's a piece of it too. Like and again, I work with a lot of horse people, so I get, and there's a lot of like, am I allowed to do it that way? Or am I going to get shamed for doing that way? Like, there's a lot of really strong opinions. So I think part of it is also that fear of judgment, or somebody's going to think I'm crazy. And I mean, I still feel that sometimes, right? Like, I have a very different way of being in a relationship with my horses, and I have lots of people think I'm nuts. You know, so there's, but I think that that's a piece of it too. It's like, there's a very strong opinionated kind of, I think, thread in the horse industry. And I think we're also afraid of being judged, or, you know, doing something that is maybe not what we're being told to do.
Absolutely, because there's very strong authority figures often, you know, like our coaches or trainers, and it's done like this. I know that was big for me growing up, where it was like I had, you know, my coach was terrifying, just to be perfectly honest, and it was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to, you know, I don't want to rock this boat. So that can definitely come in, and it's hard sometimes to draw on our own knowing, you know, and trust it.
Totally. The funny thing for me is, like, I've been around horses since I was a kid. I went to school to be a horse breeder. I learned about equine healthcare. You know, I worked on places that had 100 horses. So I knew how to take care of horses, but I didn't have the typical upbringing, and I remember at my first place, you know, having neighbors or people that I was working with that were horse people basically just put down everything I was doing. Like, you're not doing this right, you're not doing this right. And that was hard. That was really, like, there was a part of me, I started to really question and doubt things. So it really took a lot of self-empowerment, and just basically look at, like, my horses are healthy, my horses are happy, you know, they are very good, you know, in terms of working with the farrier and the vet and the people. And so I know what I'm doing, but it's hard when you don't feel like you have that background, or you don't see things the way that is the norm. There's judgment. So that was a big piece for me, is being able to empower, like, this is the way that I do things, and I know what I'm doing, and I just have to more look at my horse and that relationship, and what I'm, than the people that are telling me how I should and should not do things. You know, even down to, like, having my horses. The funny thing is, when I was in the Lower Mainland, it was crazy to have my horses out together and not come in at night every night, right, in the barn.
Yeah.
So that was crazy. Up here, I kind of fit in more. I think when I moved up here, they thought, oh, she's going to be a crazy person from the coast that's going to blanket her horses and have them in a barn,
And they're just
horses
out.
live in a herd. That's right. They live in a herd 24/7, out and they have trees for shelter and they're fine. So, but there's, so I've been exposed to both of those places of judgment too.
Absolutely.
So it's almost like you can't do anything right, but you have to, I think the thing that I've come down to is just, it has to be about what feels good to me and what's happening with my horses. And I can't listen to what somebody else is telling me, but I think that's a journey, getting to a place.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a part of the breach we're talking about, right? Is like, okay, what's that? It was interesting. I had a conversation with a gal in my apprenticeship the other day, and she's like, wow, this stuff is really out there for me. And I said to her, like, just take in what feels right for you. I'm not here to force anything down your throat at all, right? There is that sense when someone, there's this teacher or this authority that are telling you what to do, there's this sense of, okay, I have to like ingest every piece of that, even if some of it like, feels like, oh, that doesn't fit for me, right?
Right. So, totally. Yeah.
So
and
any advice around that for people?
I mean, and because and I feel like I'm laughing. I feel very fortunate. When I moved to Kamloops, I have an amazing vet. My vet is like absolutely incredible. Jennifer Jackson, Kamloops large animal vet. She's amazing, and we talk about these things, but it's nice. Like you find the people that kind of relate or connect to. Like-mindedness. I honestly think there's something to be said about finding a like-minded community that really resonates in how you want to be with horses. And that was a huge one for me, that I wasn't kind of this isolated, crazy person, that was doing things on my own. So I think that where we have to learn how to do it for ourselves, that self-empowerment thing. I will say that find like-minded people that I think aren't judging you or having an opinion on everything that you do, or this is right or this is wrong. I think that helps. I think community is a big thing. So I've been able to kind of find the horse people that really resonate. And I think I've created a community as well, where I work with people that are, they know there's a different way and they're looking for that empowerment of community. So I think that's huge. So probably like, with what you're doing as well. If you can seek out a professional, like I'm lucky with my vet, we're on the same wavelength and I really like that. I got to a place where I was secure enough, and I think probably also having a background of where I went through horse healthcare, I was a little bit informed. I did have, an understanding of things. So I didn't necessarily get bullied by having to do all these things. But so I think there's a place of like empowering what you know, but also if you can find people that are on the same wavelength, I think that's also empowering as well, that are doing things that are similar to how you want to do things and you really resonate with, as you're finding your strength and owning what you think, I think is important. So I'm lucky I have a vet that is very much on the same wavelength and gets it, and is both conventional and holistic, because I think you gotta have to have a blend of both. There's definitely
absolutely there's a time and a place for all of it. Absolutely.
I often say, like I joke, I say to my horses sometimes, it's not a democracy, so I'm a caretaker, and I have a horse that has a tendency to founder sometimes, so he wears a muzzle in the spring and summer, and that's what he needs to do. So there's that piece of like we're not blind to physically taking care of horses, but it's find your tribe, love them hard. I think let it be sort of a mirror affirmation that you're not nuts. I think that's important.
So it's a nice affirmation to have, and I think that's beautiful. I often talk about like finding that team, right? Like, whether it's like your vet and your farrier, someone doing teeth like that, or whatever it is, body work, if that's a thing, if you're working with performance horses, or but having that team that you can work with, that
out there. Yeah.
It's out there. Absolutely. I mean, more and more and more this is happening, right? So, you know, and thankfully there are like online communities and things that people can take part in. And I know you've got some things coming up, and, you know, these are areas where we can kind of bolster our confidence a little bit in, you know, what is kind of arising in us of going, I think I need to do this a little differently, or I think I need to change things up a bit here. Or, you know, very often someone will have that one horse that enters their life that like just busts it all up, right? You know, they've had like their you know, real chill Joe for however long, and then all of a sudden they get like a diva or a, you know, one of these firecrackers that all of a sudden you're like, oh, so all those things that I knew
out the window.
Right. So you're not gonna put up with that anymore? Yeah. And you could probably resonate completely with that, you know, having those kinds of things.
I do. I joke, and I think I mean, I don't know, I might be making this up, but I think also because of, and this is the beauty of the thing, is I always say, like, I'll probably keep my integrity and humility as long as I have horses, because let me tell you, I don't get away with shit. You know, I got no wiggle room.
So true. Oh God. And whenever you think you're like, you know, oh yeah, look at me, and then it's like take you down a peg, right? It's like,
exactly. Yeah. But I think, you know, and that's the whole thing of being able to appreciate and be present to that learning that they're giving us, because it's so rich. Like, I honestly feel like as long as I have horses in my life, I'll be constantly growing. And I think knowing myself better, and, you know, that's a very rich journey. So I appreciate it. And every time there's a new horse that comes into my herd, I'm very interested in who's this horse and what are they teaching me of, and what's going on in my life that I'm attracted, this horse is attracted here, or, you know, in terms of what do I do in my work with my clients, and how do I need to be with this horse in a different way? You know, like I have this pregnant mare. Well, she's half feral.
right.
So, you know, interacting with her is very different than interacting with a horse that has had exposure to people. So just even way more sensitive to where she's able to be touched or how you can work with her. You have to pay attention to where her buttons are, and, you know, how do I build that trust with her and listen to, you know, what that journey's been. So oh, hold on a second. I'm hoping that's not something that you can steal.
We're pausing for.
Yeah, it's okay. It's just my dog stole. He likes to eat my card decks. So
oh no! Which one did he decide on today?
No, I took it. It's a new one I got. And yeah, but, you know, so that's, I think the thing is like they're constantly, you know, teaching us and forcing us to learn new skills and to new awarenesses. And I think that, you know, again, I think that part of being able to acknowledge and see our horses that way, it deepens the relationship. I think the relationship and bond that you create when you're able to add that element, I think can be hugely transformative also for the horse, you know. And in all honesty, I think a big part of why I think this work is so important, and I've seen it with my own horses, when they come here, they have baggage, and some of them are shut down because they've been in, you know, situations where they haven't been seen, or they haven't been treated well, or they have had to just, you know, be a trail horse or do this, and they don't get a say. And so part of, you know, being able to see them this way, it's actually very healing for them too. They get to come back to themselves. And I think, you know, in some ways we owe it to them. I think horses, they're so serving of us. And again, we don't have to feel guilty about that. We don't have to go and feel ashamed that, you know, we've been show jumping or whatever, because I think they choose that too, but they give so much in service of us. I think we owe it to them to be a little bit more conscious of how we're engaging with them, because it does have an impact on them too. You know, their mental and emotional and spiritual and, you know, physical well-being is very much impacted. So, you know, I think oftentimes when something's going on with the horse, you know, looking at how are we contributing to that, of what's going on for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We talk, Laura and I talk a lot about this idea of horses as sort of, really teaching us about true partnership,
Yes.
and,
Yeah.
that being a big part of their role, and that partnership being like a healthy one, that there's give and there's take, and there's contributions on both sides and honoring on both sides of the gifts, one of the things that I've sort of thought about over the years is, this idea of like that every horse has medicine, for us, like, that each and every one of them, has something really, really important to contribute. And that, the mere fact that they're in your life is, there's significance to that,
Yes.
Yes. If we allow ourselves to kind of see past that veil a little bit, and ask those questions and be curious around it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think like that's the biggest thing, like the starting point, I think, is the curiosity, is curious without judgment, without going into the place of judging ourselves of whatever, but to be curious.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know you have this really cool offering coming up that goes into this piece, so tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah. And so why I created this actually is I had, like I said, I work with a lot of horse people, or mostly women. And I had somebody ask me, like, how do I know the medicine of my horse? And, how do I know when I'm going out there, what messages I'm getting? And so I realized, I'm like, oh, I could probably help people with this. So it's sort of like, I think the first step in transitioning to being in partnership with our horses from, I think, a very, let's say, surface level, from that very physical riding, to really understanding the deeper way that they're communicating with us, and how we kind of nurture a communication, both from, I think, a physical standpoint, because I think that's important, but also like the more energetic and intuitive thing of how do I read my horse, and how do I start to discern the messages that are coming from this horse. And so I think sometimes there's people are like, I feel like my horse is trying to tell me something, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So I think it's really being able to learn and understand that language from a different perspective. So I'm doing kind of like a month-long journey, I call it, of teaching people how to do this with their own horses. And then also, people that are maybe just drawn to horses and they don't know why, and they want to connect to horses. Like I have a woman in there that works for the SPCA, and she gets exposed to horses, and she wants to be able to connect and work with them in a different way than just probably what she sees on, the front lines of that. So she's in that. So it's, I think, either you have a horse and you're wanting to develop a deeper partnership with them and understand sort of this place of messaging, or you work with horses and are wanting to maybe be able to help them or to learn about that, so that you can kind of assist in a maybe more holistic way of, how you're working with the horses. And then, so that's kind of what this is. And my horses are going to be part of it. So if you don't have horses that you can work with, my herd is going to be in there. So I'll be kind of doing videos, and it's, cause I've had people ask me, how does this work? So it's online, it's a month long.
And it's called Reading the Soul of Horses. Is that right?
It's called Reading the Soul of Horses. Yeah. And a piece of it too, it's like, I think horses are kind of a medium also for communicating with our own wisdom. So there's kind of a couple of layers in there too, where we get to also tap into, I think, our own intuition and inner voice through that conversation with the horse. So there's going to be like weekly kind of training videos and modules and guided audio, so people can kind of do it at their own pace. And then I'll be in there assisting if people have questions or there are things that are coming up for them. And then I'll be, kind of sharing videos with my herd, so we can practice on that. And then each week is going to have kind of a different element of the teaching to really empower, feeling kind of confident and clear in that communication. So you can kind of do it at your own pace, but still have facilitation at the same time. And I have people in there that have horses. I have people in there that don't have horses, but they're very drawn to understanding that they maybe might be exposed to horses in a different way. Like one of my clients is in it. She doesn't have a horse, but she's making jewelry with horsehair is something
Right.
she really wants to do. She wants to be able to kind of tune into the energy of the horse that she's working with as part of her process. So she wanted to, so, there's sort of a different, people coming to it. But yeah, I think for people that are looking for that transition or know, I feel like there's some message coming through, but I don't really understand how to start to begin to develop a different relationship with my horse. It's a good place to start. So yeah, we start on Monday.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. So we'll give Hillary's information out in a little bit here, and it'll be up on the podcast recording page as well, to check that out. But that sounds really amazing. I think it's going to be a powerful offering. And I know, I've got a chance to go up to Hillary's place and be in her herd, last year, and it was just, would love to chat a little bit more about, what your process is like. How do you meet, because there's these horses coming from all over the place, what's a bit of your process around really understanding a horse and getting to know them?
So it's an interesting, I definitely will say I get a lot of people, I don't say yes to every horse. I can't, because I would have 50 horses in my field tomorrow
at least.
So I have to have some semblance of a boundary around that. And that's why I'll have a waiting list. But it's interesting, like a few of my horses, I've actually kind of felt them before they come. I know it's kind of weird, but I sort of have a sense of there's a horse coming. Sometimes I get very specifically like the color and gelding mare, like that happens a lot. I have an intention, really is the intention that I create is I get horses that want to partner with me in this work. So that, they're wanting to kind of step into what I do here. And I tend to, if I can, for the most part, I'll meet the horse before they come, just to make sure that I also feel like they're able to be in my setting. So, I have, I have two, I have a senior herd where I have, I've now split it into two herds, but I have my senior horses that are like 27, 28, 29. And the pregnant mares with them, and they're not out in the big herd. That kind of was a little bit too much for them. And then I have my big herd. So I have 16 out, and they probably have about 50 acres. And so the horse needs to be able to be in that environment, where they could be in a herd setting. Now I'm very fortunate I've had horses that maybe I thought, I don't know how this is going to go, but the herd teaches them. But that's an important that they kind of vibe with and are able to kind of be in the dynamics of what I have. So that's a little bit of like, I meet the horse. Again, usually the ones that I'm saying yes to are the ones that they're either coming to me or they're in big trouble. They're either being euthanized or put down. So they come to me typically. Usually people hear about me. I get probably numerous messages, and I have to be a little bit discerning of who I can say yes to and that. So right now, like I said, we are full, but I do have a waiting list. So typically what I do is if somebody passes away then the space opens up and I can take another. So that's a little bit about, and again, just like, how do I know? It's a little bit of like, I meet the horse and I have an idea of, is it going to be a fit? And also, do I feel like they want to be here? Because I think there's choice in that too. And they do, and they usually come right in and they speak to my tribe, and they, speak to, like the last two horses, the Malachi, who I rescued from the SPCA, and Callie, just had really big responses to those two horses. So, so that's that process, a little bit about, how the horses come here. And, I don't know if you want me to talk a little bit about my facilitation process, or how we doing for time.
I think we're just finishing up here, so we've got a few more minutes. If you want to share a little bit about it, and then we'll get into some resources. I really want to hear kind of what your favorite things are right now.
Yeah. So again, I'll just kind of go really briefly, but the way that I facilitate with my horses actually is very similar to when I was, growing up, spending time with horses out in the field, and stuff would happen now that I'm a little bit more conscious of what was going on. So I really just take people out to the herd at liberty. And I think a big process too is teaching people, how do we safely be in the space of horses, and talk about animals. And I'll tell you, it's a little bit shocking how many horse people don't know horses prey animals, and I have to teach that. And so there's a whole process of that, and we go into the space and we see who shows up. So which horses show up for us. I do activities, but typically there's a process of getting to an activity, but I really like just bringing people into the organics of spending time in a herd of horses, and we see what happens. And, paying attention to which horse shows up for that person and why, what's going on in their life, so we can really see the meaning. And facilitating with the herd. So people are really blown away. Like, you go out into a field, they have 50 acres and they're choosing to come and hang out with me, to leave their herd mates, and they aren't grazing. So that's a little bit of the process. And then, again, teaching people about horses as prey animals, and again, with the herd, there's the safety thing. So that's really all it is. I mean, there's a lot that goes on in there.
And then within that container, right? Because it's basically like creating safe space for the horse and the person. Yeah. And then there's, it really leaves, unimaginable possibilities of what might occur. And as we both know, there's magic in that space, which is almost like it's sometimes hard to believe. I know when I go into some of those, and I haven't done a ton of facilitation in this way, but I do some with Diva. And I always am blown away, because I'm like, oh my God, I did not expect that to happen all the time. And I you kind of go out there going, oh my God, is anything going to happen? And then it's just like, whoa, like that blew my mind,
Yeah, I love what I love about this work is that I'm never not blown away. I always leave the field being like, I can't, I always say, you can't even make this stuff up. Like, I can't even believe what I see sometimes. But that's really, it's the organic of that. And I'm there to kind of facilitate and interpret and help people, that's a blend of what I'm witnessing, but also a big empowerment of trying to teach people how to read their own mirrors, so that they can go out and, be able to do that themselves. And they don't, need to have me hanging around to do that with them.
Yes. Skill building is good. Oh, that sounds awesome. Well, one of these days I'll get up there again. I'd love to do some work with you. And and I'm so appreciative of you coming on today. So tell us a little bit, do you have any favorite resources at the moment, or like long time favorites that you recommend? I know I heard you say Dow of Equus, which is also one of my faves, but
I have a lot of respect for Linda in terms of, what she's exposed in the industry. So I think like the Dow of Equus is a good one. I love Riding Between the Worlds, is a little bit more of the spiritual based one. I think that, the power of the herd, like she's got some very interesting concepts in terms of, how we interpret the archetypes and the different things of the horses that I think people have found really interesting. So I think her books are always really great. I haven't, to be honest, I haven't really, my best resource 100% is my horses.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Sure.
Yeah. Like,
and I love that. I mean, that's so great to speak to. It's like, we don't always think that way. We go to the books and the videos and the this and the that, but do we always take the time to go, what is happening in front of me right now? Like truly, really,
That's right. And I say, like, because I train people in this work, and I often say to people, like, you'll learn more from your horses than you ever will from me. And they will teach you everything if, you're just open to it. So yeah, I think they're a huge resource. And, but yeah, Linda Cohn, like the Dow of Equus, I think for me, when I read that book, I remember it just like, it clicked some things into place for me, that somebody articulated the things that I'd kind of been feeling. And so I think her story of, bridging that transition is an interesting story. So, and then, that and probably Riding Between the Worlds are my two probably favorite of,
Yeah, I still have the weird sensation where I can't get through Dow of Equus without crying.
Yeah.
Like, what is this? I think it's just that resonance of like, oh, I think so.
Yeah. Oh, I remember sobbing. So it's a good, I think it's a good book.
Totally. Yeah. That's awesome. So tell us how we find you. What are the best reasons?
Best way to find me, HillarySchneider.com. And then I guess you'll,
I'll these as well.
Because that program is in it's not like linked on my website. I'd have to kind of share the different link, or on Facebook. So there's a couple, like you can find me Hillary Schneider on Facebook. And I've just created actually a Facebook group that I've called Horse Medicine Collective. That's especially for people that are starting to be interested in this, or they're working with horses in a different way. So we talked about community. So that's a kind of a free resource, if you kind of resonate what I talk about and you want to connect with other people. And it's, you know, people all over the world are kind of in that. I have some peeps from Australia and, you know, South Africa, and that just are looking for a place that speaks to a different way of being with horses. So that's another place to kind of come in and be exposed to community with this work, and then the website.
Awesome. Okay. Well, those will be listed below. I'll also make sure I get your Facebook page on there and things. And yeah, and thank you so much for spending the time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been good timing, Luca. It's been it's really lovely to connect. I think it's an important conversation. So I'm glad for the opportunity.
Excellent. It feels that way for sure. We will talk again soon, I definitely hope. And yeah, have an amazing time with your program and an incredible summer up there. And if anybody wants a really beautiful place to go and stay, I would definitely recommend Hillary's place. It is amazing. Yeah. Wonderful. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you taking the time. We know that time is, you know, not always an easy thing to find. So thank you for tuning into us while you muck out your barn or go for a ride or do something else. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.